Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Stephen here, Northwest Small Batch Brewing. It is time for a brew talk. I'm not going to tell you what this is because I'm not sure if that video is out yet, because it depends on where things fall. If it's not out yet, I don't want to ruin the surprise. If it is out yet, I'll put a link, in the description, and it usually shows up in the top corner. If not, you'll just have to wait and see. So today's video is on hop storage. But before I get into hop storage, I was thinking on my way home from work, I wanted to talk about homebrewing YouTube channels. And I really want to implore you, if you're into homebrewing, to seek out and subscribe to as many homebrewing channels as you can on YouTube. If you're not a huge fan of the channel, you don't have to, you can adjust the bell icon to either send you a notification when that person puts out a new video, or to not, where you can just go look at their channel when you feel like it and have time. So you can adjust, how often you're getting pinged for that kind of stuff. But here's the reason I'm saying this. I've seen a huge decline in the last 6 months, maybe even a little bit more, on homebrewing YouTube channels. The reality is almost nobody who is putting out videos on homebrewing actually does it for a living. I can only think of one channel, to be honest, and I'm not going to name names and channels, not that there's anything negative, but I can only think of one channel that I know of that's actually making a living, like that's their primary source of income. And generally with those channels, that they've also learned how to branch out. They're doing Instagram and TikTok, and they've got a website, and they're selling, you know what I mean? Like they've branched, because it's not, YouTube by itself is not enough. And the real reason is because it's a niche market, right? If you look at a YouTube channel of a home brewer compared to a YouTube channel of almost anybody else, the subscriber count's much lower. The viewing hours are much lower. Sometimes there's a misconception that someone has a YouTube channel and they've got, 50,000 subscribers. They must be making a ton of money. And the reality is, it's just not true. It's not true at all. And I will name one name because I'm really pleased that they did this. If you look back, might be a month or two, maybe not that far back, but Clawhammer Supply, right? They went down to, well, they've been down a couple of times, down to New Zealand to film content with Stillet, which is another great channel. And their videos and their collaborations have been amazing. I love both those channels. But Kyle did a video where he talked about how much money they made, or how much money they make in general on YouTube. And he was pointing out that when you make these kinds of, content, he's got to pay all his employees that are working for him. They have to pay for airfare if they're flying somewhere, the hotel, food. By the time you add all this up, they don't make any money. In fact, they lose money on making these YouTube videos. And even if you look at a smaller scale, same thing, right? On a smaller scale, like I am buying all the ingredients to make this beer, and sure, I get beer out of it, but I don't make anything on YouTube. But if I did, it would never be enough to cover the cost of even the beer I'm making. It just isn't there. So that's why I'm employing people, because look, everybody who's making YouTube videos on homebrewing, we could still homebrew and just not put it on YouTube. We wouldn't have to worry about the video and the editing and all of that stuff, right? We do it because we like to share what we're doing. We love the hobby. But it really shows appreciation, and it's a nice thing to do if you can, watch people's channels, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, and it makes a big difference for that person who's really putting in the work and effort to try to keep this hobby and everybody in it, right? We're all in this community, and I've found that YouTube is probably the best place to go for the homebrewing community. Although I hear Instagram is good, I'm just not. I'm not really a social media person, so I don't have all that. At any rate, I'm going to move on. I spent way too long on that. Storing hops. So real quickly, the longer you store hops, I think most of us know this, you get a loss of aroma in bittering. And sometimes I see people go and say, oh, you have to buy hops brand new for every batch. But most people don't. In fact, big brewing companies buy their entire year's worth of hops all at once. So what happens when hops get old? Well, you can tell when you're drinking a beer because it will get kind of a weird, off, cheesy flavor, kind of skunky, cheesy nastiness, right? That's generally what you're going to get from a beer that has hops that have oxidized and start to go bad. So how do you avoid it? Well, the best way to preserve your hops is to watch out for heat. You know, hops react to heat. They react to light. They oxidize from light. And of course, oxygen itself. This was an interesting statistic that I read. Hops stored at 75 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's just a little above room temperature, will go bad 4 times faster than if they're kept frozen. So there's your first goal. If you're storing hops for future use, don't store them at room temperature. Store them in the freezer. That's the first way to help keep your hops fresh or, viable. Secondly is vacuum sealing them. Now, something I'm going to start doing that I didn't even think of. I've been vacuum sealing in just clear plastic, vacuum seal bags. And of course that gets the oxygen or most of the oxygen out. And that's one of the things that causes hops to go bad. However, you still have sunlight. Even if you're storing it in your freezer, you still have sunlight every time you open the freezer door, right? I just found on Amazon these Mylar bags, like the balloons. And they're relatively small, but they're perfectly sized for hops. And you can get them for about $1 a bag. So I think I ordered like 100 or something like that of them. Maybe not that many. I can't remember. Anyway, it actually ended up not being that expensive. And that way you can vacuum seal in these Mylar containers instead of clear plastic. And now you're also keeping the sunlight out. And that I think is going to be the best way you can preserve your hops. Vacuum seal in Mylar containers that you put in the freezer. All right, that being said, hops are not all equal, right? Cone hops or whole cone fresh hops are going to go bad much faster. They have much more green vegetal matter on the outside, and it's going to oxidize and go bad significantly faster, to the point where I would say you should probably try not to store and save fresh hops. If you're using fresh cone hops, try to use them right away. That's one of the reasons why a lot of hop companies pelletize their hops into little pellets, is because it removes a lot of that vegetal matter. And so you have less chance of oxidation and going bad. And when you vacuum seal them, it makes it a much tighter seal as well. So that's helpful. So the other problem, and this is something you should think about, is over time, your hops lose their alpha acid. So if you have hops that have been sitting in your freezer for 6 months, keep in mind, just because you bought them and they were at 12 alpha acid, doesn't mean they still are. In fact, they're not. They've gone down. How much? I don't know. I think there's some calculators online that you can use to get a rough estimate. But I think a good rule of thumb is if you're using hops that you didn't just buy, you should probably add a little extra. How much extra is up to you, but you should add a little extra to account for that loss of alpha acid. So how long do hops last in the freezer, vacuum sealed in Mylar? At least a year, I would say. Once you get past a year, you really need to start doing the sniff test. First, see how they smell. Is there any cheesy or skunkiness smell to them that smells wrong? If so, don't use them. Generally speaking, a year is probably the point where, you need to start really checking the hops and seeing whether or not they're still good. And like I said, if you dry hop, right? If you're dry hopping a beer like a hazy IPA, New England IPA, you should try and use all freshly bought hops for dry hopping. Because for the same reason, you're losing all the alpha acid, your oils, your aroma is going down the longer you store your hops. So if you're storing hops for dry hopping, you're going to start losing the whole reason for dry hopping the longer you store them. So if you can, try to use freshly purchased hops for dry hopping. Cryo hops is a good option too. Cryo hops will last longer if you store them because there's less vegetal matter on them. But again, fresher is going to be better. So anyway, I hope it helps. Went a little over, but hey, go support your local YouTube homebrewing channels. I'll see you in another week for another video. Cheers, and keep on brewing.